Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get yourself a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/sweetstorybro. With over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player, man, you're spoiled for choice with something to listen to. So I know what you're going to do as soon as this show is ended. You're going to head over to audibletrial.com/sweetstorybro and pick yourself up something free today.
Now hear this. The following podcast is likely to contain numerous instances of vulgarity or profanity, which some may deem inappropriate. If you're of an overly sensitive disposition, stop listening now. Additionally, the podcast will be filled with numerous spoilers throughout, so if you haven't had an opportunity to read, watch, or enjoy the story prior to this broadcast, please do so, before continuing with this episode of Sweet Story, Bro.
Get ready for action! 3, 2, 1, fight!
It's about that time again, man. Take my hand as you and I go on a journey of discovery together as we explore in depth another geek story, the best kind. Yes, that's right. It's time for another episode of Sweet Story Bro with me, your host, as always, your friend, your writerly friend, the one who wants to write, the writer who will write, Steve Russell. Thank you again for downloading this episode, the latest episode, one of many, number 17 we're up to now because we didn't reboot. We didn't do that. We didn't do the comic book thing of going way back to number 1 just because we changed a couple of things, or major things, actually, in all honesty. A lot of things did change with the format. But we didn't reset. What we did is we took it as a lesson and we carried it forward, keeping that number going and giving this show already a sense of minor history, if you will, for the long-time listeners. But I hope you enjoyed the last show being the first show, and keep up with me here, but you're smart, I know that. I know you won't struggle. The last show being the first show of the new format style that we are doing here for this show, your favorite show on Geek Stories, because I still look at the pros, I look at the cons. We're not going beat for beat anymore. No, sir. No, sir, we're not doing that. We're looking at the pros, we're looking at the cons, we're looking at the geeky, we're looking at the story. Everything still comes back to the story. So I could review a video game, for example. I won't really be going waxing lyrical on graphics or anything like that, or the game engine. I may touch on it, perhaps, just very, very slightly. But the crux of what I'll be talking about, as always, is the story. Why? Because I want to write, and in order to become a better writer, I need to imbibe in this as a drug, man. I need to take in as many stories as I can from every medium, because you can take influence from anywhere. I think this is a thing with creative people as a whole, or people who want to be creative and haven't found their outlet yet. You try so desperately to do this thing, and sometimes you feel a little bit like a fraud. Like, I feel I could read a lot more, and I read a lot as it is, across the board. I read quite a bit, but I always feel I could read a lot, and there's a lot of circles, writing circles on Twitter, online, things like that I'm not even aware of. And it's not that case that if I don't want to know about it or I don't care about it, it's just that I'm not aware of it. And sometimes you feel a little bit like a fraud, sometimes. But what matters is that you keep going, because knowing about these things and being a deep ingrained part of it doesn't make you a writer. Writing makes you a writer. And that segues me quite nicely onto the next bit of the intro, as we always do. How is temporary? What have I been up to? Okay, guys, this is it. Settle down. If you're driving, slow down, pump the brake just a little bit, because you are about to be shocked. If you're standing up, sit the fuck down, because I don't want you to fall over. No, I haven't been signed, okay? Sorry for the tease there. Haven't been signed just yet, but the good news is I have been submitting finally. Yes. As my boy Daniel Bryan always says, yes, yes, yes. It's finally happened. That tipping point has come around. Don't get too hyped, though. I mean, right now I've only submitted to one person, and I already got the rejection letter. And I say that with a slight smirk on my face, because I'm sure it's going to be the first of many, but the key is I have submitted it. I got over that fear, the one I've been talking about so long. Now the key is to just keep going at it, keep submitting to different agencies, to different agents. I feel like I've overcome something great here. I feel like a weight was lifted off my shoulder, although literally what I did was I hit send and I ran away from my computer. I hit send. I got everything in order because the materials that this particular agent wanted, I had ready to go. And it's a shame because I chose this agent. This was the first one for a reason. I was really hoping the fates would smile on me and I would be the exception. I hope that I would be able to apply to this guy and he would like me. And the very first person I went to would sign me. How naive, how stupid, how wonderfully, stupidly naive, no less. Endearingly so, I hope. But yeah, that didn't happen. And it's a shame because I was really hopeful for him because a lot of the stuff on his agent page was going on and on and on about the stuff he liked. And there was a lot of cross-section interest between the stuff I liked and he liked. So I was like, oh man, like if anybody's going to get this superhero story, what I'm trying to achieve with this concept of moral choice as a person with powers, it could be this guy because he likes so many of the same things I like. But unfortunately, it wasn't for him. He sent me back a very polite response. Like I said, I hit send and I ran away from the computer. I actually ran away from my flat studio apartment. I ran all the way to the gym for jiu-jitsu to take my mind off of what I just done. The butterflies in my stomach were throwing up. I ran away. I got beat up. I did some beating up, and then I came back. And as I was watching an old episode, I was watching some New Japan because of the G1 Climax right now. I was watching some New Japan in bed as my girlfriend slept peacefully next to me. And I got the rejection letter at that point in time. But I was grateful because it took 6 hours instead of 6 weeks. So I was happy for that, but it doesn't change the fact it was a rejection. So there's that to deal with. But hey, man, I've been proudly showing off this rejection because it means I tried. I submitted it to someone. Now the key is, of course, to keep that rolling, baby, and keep it going. Don't stop. Now, this is the point of time. Because when this episode gets released, this is going to be a little bit while ahead because I'm still playing with the reformatting stuff. And I always feel it's important. I got some feedback from the last episode from a person whose opinion I very much trust and I sought after. And he said, hey, man, like the intro you gave was great, but it was maybe a little long because you were talking about your birthday stuff a little bit. And for those that don't know you, maybe it was a little bit of a slog. If it was, I do apologize. I just find it important to take these first maybe 10 minutes or so to let you know how I'm doing as a host, as your friend, as a person who wants to share his opinions with you, because I don't want you to just take this as a show. I want you to take it like a conversation with a buddy. You know, we're shooting the shit over coffee. Maybe we're cheating on our diet slightly and having a cupcake or something. I don't know. It could be whatever you want it to be. But I don't want it to be so open and shut. So I want you to let you into my life a little bit. And it serves, of course, as a little bit of an audio log. Not a vlog, not a blog. An audio log of where I'm at in life. I can look back on that in years' time and be like, oh, shit, yeah. I mean, I did write a blog about it on writestevewright.com as well because it's too touching not to. And I included the Facebook post that I sent out because I don't use Facebook, as I mentioned in the last one. But do check that out, writestevewright.com. And, you know, I hope that you guys enjoy letting me into your life a little bit. I appreciate you letting me into your life a little bit. And I hope that, you know, we have that rapport, man. You can tweet in at me at any time at sweetstorybro, and I will respond, man. I will do my best to get back to you. Do not be shy. Do not hesitate. If you agree or disagree with some of the opinions that I espouse here, let me know. It's the only way I'm going to know, and then we can start that dialogue. Anyway. That's what Temporary is doing. Finally, some forward momentum, somewhat, you know, even if it's only in my mind because I hit sand and ran away. But don't worry, next time that you hear the next episode, hopefully I would have submitted to a lot more. Fingers crossed, God's willing, stars align and whatnot, whatever. Somebody likes what I'm trying to do. And hopefully I'll get signed and then I can get this book to you. This superhero book, this idea about powers, this idea about what you do with them, this idea about the moral responsibility, cutting deeper into the vein of what it is to be a superhero, not just so glitz and glamour, man, temporary. And if that intrigues you at all, you can follow that journey on writestevewright.com. That is what that blog is there for. But let's talk about Sweet Story, bro. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes or Stitcher if you happen to use Android to never miss a single episode. Hit up sweetstorybro.com to find the links for Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, everything pretty much that you need for the show all in one place. And that includes Amazon links for your purchasing needs. So if you listen to this story, or if you listen to the other ones prior to this, and you're like, yeah, man, you know what, that book sounds pretty good, or that movie sounds like it's worth my time, I might check that out. Hit up Amazon through sweetstorybro.com and help me out. You click on those links, you make that purchase. It doesn't cost you a penny extra, and it kicks back a percentage to moi in order to help this show. Because this is a one-man band, baby. This is one person just doing this to try and entertain you and share my opinion with you. You know, let you know what I think, and I hope that you consider me a trusted voice at this point in time, 17 episodes in and whatnot. Or if this is your very first episode, hello, thank you for joining me on this Sweet Story Bro journey. But why? Everything always comes back to the why, man. You know, you have to be able to explain why this, why that. You know, why do you really care about this or that? So why this story? Okay? Firstly, I saw that it was actually released on my birthday, as though Netflix wanted to give me a birthday treat. And I was very grateful for that, you know, to see that and be like, man, okay, this sounds kind of interesting. I haven't really heard too much hype about it. It didn't really pop up on my radar at all. But, I mean, it was literally just a tweet. Just quotes about how well it's doing, how well it's being received. And then I saw the font for it, like the logo. And I was like, shit, dude, that's so legit. Like straight 80s, like they just fucking plucked it off of a paperback and put it on there, you know? Some pulpy paperback, some horror story, supernatural shit, and put it right there. I saw a few positive tweets in favor of the show, but no spoilers, thankfully, for me. And, you know, that's rich because obviously this is a spoiler-laden show. So I'm assuming one of two things. Either you've seen the show and you want to know my uncensored, unbridled opinion on it, or you don't care about the spoilers and you want to know if it's worth your time, because I will not bullshit you, my friend. I give you the pros, I give you the cons. We talk about the geeky shit. And, of course, I tell you whether it's worth your time by deliberating if this story is officially too sweet or officially just not sweet enough. So I decided to give the show a chance. And with a little cajoling of my girlfriend in order to give it a chance too, we both decided to watch it. And that is how we got to Stranger Things. That is why we watched Stranger Things. And that is why I'm now talking about it to you, my friend, about Stranger Things. So without further ado, let us talk in depth about Stranger Things, its writing processes, the Duffer Brothers, and whether their choices and their writing style worked or didn't for me, because this is so subjective, of course. And ultimately, is Stranger Things officially too sweet or just not sweet enough? Let's find the fuck out. Let's go. Now, just to let you know what the synopsis of the show actually is, in case you are checking out this podcast review before you watch Stranger Things, or, you know, just in case you want to be have it reiterated so you know what we're talking about, so we can stay on point, on focus. Stranger Things, and this is taken again from Netflix.com. This is the official synopsis. When a young boy vanishes, a small town uncovers a mystery involving secret experiments, terrifying supernatural forces, and one strange little girl. I don't know about you, but I'm already intrigued. Let's get going. So, first and foremost, it has to be said, I am a child of the 80s. I was born in 1986. Oh, God, that was a long while ago now. It's getting away. Okay. But I only saw 4 years of the 80s. I was 4 by the time it ticked over to 1990, man. So it's not like I remember it in the way that other people would. But I do have the fond memories of watching the movies from the 80s in the early 90s as though I was experiencing them as an 80s kid. I had no concept of real time at that point, did I? Apart from my age in counting things in quarters and halves. That's when you know when you're a kid, when you're like, I'm 3.5 or whatever the fuck, 4.5. But I love the time period, man. I love that era of cinema, the TV shows as well. They were so hokey. They were so cheesy. They were so groundbreaking in a lot of places as well. They were just so great. And it's always a risk somewhat for a modern show to try and place itself within that time period, because sometimes they can get it not necessarily wrong, but it's not as genuine. It just kind of doesn't feel right. This feels right. The time period, it's just a perfect blend of Amblin-era Spielberg, mixing it with the Poltergeist, Stephen King, of course, and it's mixed as well. You know, you take those old inspirations and you mix it with some modern horror sensibilities. Some of the first things that came to my mind when I was watching the show, the very first and foremost, Silent Hill. And the Duffer Brothers mentioned in multiple interviews during the research process I did for this show how Silent Hill has affected and influenced the visual look and the style of the story going forward within Stranger Things. But not only that, man, Resident Evil as well. There's concepts and how things look within this. I mean, how can you not look at the monster from the upside down and not think really of that weird blend of Silent Hill and Resident Evil? Especially, I think it's Resident Evil 4 onwards, where you can shoot one of the guys and instead of just dying because they're infected, not zombies per se, they mutate into something else and they have like plant heads. And it's weird. It's a weird thing. But if you look it up in line, it's the same sort of concept that we have here for the monster. The Demogorgon, as the kids lovingly nicknamed it, using their own cultural touchstones in order to make sense of the world around them. Fucking love it. That's another thing that's so prevalent within that sort of 80s Amblin cinema, is just kids trying to understand the world around them, preteens, teens with sexual awakenings, things like that. And this is all touched upon with the series. But the time period rocks it. I love the time period, the execution of how it looks. And this is down to fucking minute detail, man. I'm telling you, if you didn't see this, go back and have a look, right? There's a couple of scenes, really fucking tiny things. And this is beyond clothes. This is beyond set dressing for locations and storefronts. Look at things like the Coke cans. Look at things like the Pringles can, man. Seriously, it's insane the amount of detail. It's got the old school logo. It's got the shape as well, because cans in the 80s, they were a lot more square. They weren't so curved, they weren't so sleek as they are now. It sounds like such a dorky thing to notice or to highlight, but it's true, and the detail is there. Amazing work. I love the time period this is set in. But of course, the story can only... The story for this, because it's such a visual medium, and the first TV show that we've reviewed for Sweet Story Bro, lives or dies with the performances somewhat, because it could be a compelling story that falls flat due to poor performances. Thankfully, that's not the case here. The actors, and I mean across the board, are seriously phenomenal. They all knock it out of the park 100%. Everybody, the adults, the kids, the teens are on form. And, you know, for kid actors, they're just absolutely phenomenal. You don't look at them as they act and think, hey, these are just kids acting. No, they inhabit their role, and because of that, they're able to tell this story on a much deeper level. So, I mean, storytelling in this sort of visual medium, movies, TV shows, acting is storytelling, is how they get it across, is how they convey it. That's why I've included this point. Otherwise, I wouldn't do, because some might argue it's not directly related to the writing or the writing style. But if I were to write something for the screen, you know you want the right actor to tell that story, and they did exactly that. I mean, the closest thing to overacting, the closest thing to, quote, poor acting in this entire series is potentially, and this is really stretching for a counterpoint, Winona Ryder herself, which is ironic because she's like the, quote, main character of this thing as the woman who lost her son. And, like, even that, you know, I say that she was great in it. She's just, you know, like I say, the closest thing to overacting, but certainly not bad at all. The feel of the Upside Down and the monster, you know, the Silent Hill, Resident Evil, like evil E.T., poltergeist vibes of the show are blended into an amazing mix that pays respect and tips the hat, whilst distilling its influences into something uniquely new. And this is my probably all-time favorite thing about this show, is the way that it takes its influences, the way it wears it so proudly on its sleeve, and it takes influences from so many different places and patches them together that it creates something fresh. It creates something new, but with nudge, nudge, wink, winks to everything else that came before it. And I pulled this quote from Ross Duffer on how Stranger Things uses references and homage to the things that they love. And it's taken from an interview with Hitfix.com. Quote, "The real goal was to just go back to that style of storytelling. It was us looking back to the kinds of movies that made us do what we want to do, the stuff that we grew up loving, and the Stephen King novels. And it's trying to just capture the feel of those. That was the real goal. And a few times with stuff like Will running into the shed, which is clearly an homage to E.T., or the typewriter thing being an homage to Jaws, we would let there be some moments that nodded at the movies that we loved and that inspired us to do what we're doing. That was more the goal. It's not like we're in the writer's room going, let's reference these movies here and this movie there. It's more setting the story in motion and then seeing where that story would go. And then occasionally, we couldn't help ourselves with the bike chase. End quote. I love that. Again, it's not about letting the influences rule you. You're not making a story based around influences. You're letting the influences, impact the work itself as you're going along. And one thing, again, that I found in my research as I was trying to understand their writing choices and the writing style of the Duffer Brothers, twin brothers no less, only 2 years older than me. God. They're very open about the fact that a lot of the stuff within Stranger Things they didn't have the answers for at first. They kind of made it up as they went along almost, kind of like Lost, which is interesting considering a lot of people have compared this to Super 8. And I can see those comparisons for sure. I really do, like a darker, more twisted, more violent Super 8. A better Super 8, arguably. But J.J. Abrams, of course, is a big supporter of the mystery box concept. He's the one that really floated the idea to everybody in Hollywood through that TED Talk. And I think the Duffer Brothers subscribed to that phenomenally well. But there's if they were still writing episodes as they were shooting episodes, so they didn't exactly know where it would go. So they let a lot of the stuff impact the way they write it. Look at the character of Dustin, for example. One of the things that I saw in one of the interviews was them saying that Dustin helped to craft his own character. Originally, he was a very, very one-dimensional sort of geeky character, and with the actor being so capable and powerful within that role, the character Dustin became a lot more than what they originally envisaged him for. And it's interesting how people can do that, inflect upon their own character as an actor. And one of those people that did that as well within the story was the actor who played Steve, the bully boy, who gets a face turn during the course of the show's 8-episode run. And, despite being a prototypical rich jock boy, ends up being something slightly more. And I really enjoyed this because there's an interesting twist to a normally standard trope within, especially that kind of time period of movies. Good guys, assholes are assholes. People learn lessons and stuff, but usually the asshole just gets the comeuppance and that's it. He doesn't learn a lesson. He doesn't become a better person. So they actually went out of their way to try and give full arcs to lesser characters. Although Steve does become a major component by the end of the episode of the series, coming back. That role, incidentally, was supposedly meant to go to Winona Ryder's ex-husband in the show. He was meant to come back in order to help out, but it went to Steve instead. And I think that was the right choice, honestly, especially with Jonathan and Nancy being in the room together. Incidentally, just as a quick note, how clever is it that the main female character is called Nancy? Given her age, it says a lot about her parents' mindset, their sort of maybe conservative ways. Nancy Reagan, I would assume, or just that sort of name. Yeah. I think it really shows a sort of Republican conservative leaning. And it says a lot about the parents just in the name choices. It's very clever, and I think that was very purposeful, Knowing what I know now about the Duffer Brothers and how they decided to write this and research this, that's not a mistake. But I was actually able to pull this quote from Russ Duffer on Steve's personal arc, and this is taken from an interview with Variety.com. He says this, quote, "If you read the pilot, he's the biggest douchebag on the planet. It's not that he's a flawless character. He's flawed. But Joe is so good we started to fall in love with the idea that he's an arc himself. He's maybe not the perfect guy, but he's maybe in with the wrong crowd. As opposed to him turning Nancy to his side, maybe it's more Nancy turning him to her side. We like giving him that arc." End quote. Of course, this all comes around later after he goes back to the cabin right at the very end in order to fight off the Demogorgon with Jonathan and Nancy, with the help, of course, with Hopper and Joyce on the side of the Upside Down. By the end, and there's a great. I love how that episode ends, man. It builds up so perfectly to that moment, and so when it happens, it's just such a coup de grace. It's great. cherry on top of cherry on top of cherry, man. And the fact, again, like I say, that you've got something like that happening where a secondary character who could have just been a total typical jock, and by the end you're like, oh, maybe she'll end up with Jonathan. That doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. It's an interesting twist. Hopper, speaking about Hopper, I find is an amazingly complex character. And throughout, again, the way that the 8 episodes go, there are hints and breadcrumbs dropped throughout about his daughter, about his past, about him losing his child. That all comes up to an emotional payoff, an amazingly emotional payoff in the last few episodes, especially in the last episode itself, as he relays. You can understand why his character is so motivated to find Will and to not let him or Joyce down. And the small town mentality, of course, they all kind of know each other as well. So there's that sort of impetus there too. Hopper is, if you didn't really connect with Hopper the first time around or found him to be a little bit boring or cliched, watch it again. There's so much subtlety to his character. There's so much under the surface. And I think that's the best way to describe him, actually, is he's constantly simmering, ready to boil over at any point. And I just think he's one of the greatest things about this show. I've mentioned it earlier, of course, but the pacing of this show as a whole, 8 episodes, eight finely honed episodes, each having its own beginning, middle, and end, and yet all playing perfectly into a grander scheme of what's going on for this show, is wonderfully paced. Perfectly paced, no less, almost, with only maybe, I can't even remember the specific episode, but maybe only one episode that didn't drag its heels, but certainly felt a little bit more slow compared to the others. And the best thing that they do is they constantly place breadcrumbs. So you can look back at the earlier episodes and thread directly to the resolutions in the later episodes, and that's just good writing. I love stuff like that. Even when it's subtle, even when it's so subtle that you miss it and you have to rewatch and go, fuck, there it is. Of course, it was there all along, man. How did I miss that? Always a satisfying payoff I found within this show. I mean, there are a couple loopholes and there are a couple things that I found a little bit odd from a writing perspective. Questions that I found, which I'll talk about when we get to the primary cons that I had with this show. But man, so many breadcrumbs laid throughout, so many avenues to explore that do get explored and do get satisfying payoffs. You need to pay attention, quite frankly, as you're watching this show in order to appreciate the pathos that is delivered to you by the end of episode 8. By those times those credits roll, man, like there should be a wave of satisfaction that washes you, as well perhaps as a little bit of being slightly perturbed by the final moments of the show. But I do have this quote. I was able to pull this, and this is from Ross Duffer again. He seems to be the more vocal out of the two brothers, him and Matt. Matt certainly does the interviews as well. It just so happens that Ross says a lot of things that help with my points, both good and negative, which is interesting. And this is taken, once again, from Variety.com. Quote, "What we wanted to do with the show, and this season specifically, was mostly seeing the mystery and these extraordinary things through the eyes of these ordinary characters. By the end of the show, they don't know or understand everything. That is purposeful. We do cut away to the government occasionally for these pops of mystery or horror, but what we didn't want was to have a scene of the scientists just sitting down to explain everything. We wanted to slowly peel back layers of this mystery for audiences through the eyes of these very ordinary people. It's not all solved by the end of the season. We wanted to resolve the main mystery of Will being gone. That was the story of this season." End quote. To follow up, I actually do have another quote on the pacing over the course of 8 episodes, and this one is taken from hitfix.com. Once again, Ross Duffer. Quote, "What they tell you is, what do you think is right to tell your story? From the first time we pitched it to them, then being Netflix, we said, this is an 8-hour story. And they said, okay, here's 8 hours. If we had said 10 or 11, they would have been with that too. To us, it's an exciting time for storytelling because what we can do is filmmakers can come up with stories and go, what is this? Is this 6 hours? 5 hours? 2 hours? Should it go to cinema? This is something that even 5 years ago would have been unprecedented. It's exciting to be part of this new style." End quote. Yes, it is. And what's great about this is they had a perceived timeline in their head. They weren't forced to make it longer. The age of 22 episode, 24 episode series should be dead. It needs to go. It is antiquated. 22, 24 episodes per season. How many filler episodes in those seasons? It's so difficult for people to maintain a consistent level of quality when you're talking about that kind of quantity. You look at the more finely honed shows. They mention True Detective in some of these quotes. True Detective, Stranger Things amongst this now too. The Sopranos, Game of Thrones, man. So many shows that are shorter are forced to write more concisely and tightly in order to get their story across. And that doesn't mean that cutting things out. That doesn't mean that they're losing out on being able to explain or give the exposition or anything like that. It's the opposite. A show that's so finely honed that they need 8 episodes, they don't need 10. And the running time across those episodes are all over the place as well. Some are 40 minutes, some are 50, some are nearly an hour. Because they don't have to condone to the TV standards of episodic television that some do. 42 minutes with adverts or whatever it happens to be. It can be as long as it needs to be. Like a chapter of a book, the chapter is as long as the chapter needs to be until it feels right to end that chapter. And I think it's interesting as well and telling that each one of these episodes are called chapters when it comes up as well. I think it just ties in with their love of this sort of story and the authors that they grew up loving, Stephen King, things like that. Now, one of the major things that I love about this show is the fact that no one is safe. Nobody. And they're trying to emulate this Game of Thrones style thing where any character can die at any time. And so it puts real threat on all of the major characters at all times. And it's a great play, especially within such a small town environment where any single death could really impact everybody within that community. Although Barbara's death, unfortunately, seems to get washed to the wayside a little bit. I've got Matt Duffer quote, the brother here, Matt Duffer, speaking on how no one is safe in Stranger Things. And this is taken from an interview. Again, this is the Variety interview. There's a lot of information in that interview, a lot of interesting information. So if this has whet your appetite slightly or piqued your curiosity, my friend, go check it out. Quote, "One reason we fell in love with television is we've seen so many movies and they tend to follow a very similar pattern. Television has been breaking narrative rules. George R.R. Martin obviously pushed that to another level with Game of Thrones. You certainly don't feel safe and it freaks you out. Every scene has a little more tension in it. With the first episode, we wanted someone to die very quickly, which was the Benny character, the diner cook, played by Chris Sullivan. Someone set up who looks like a substantial character and dies. And then Barb, who looks like a substantial character. We wanted it to feel unsafe," end quote. And I did feel that. And I have to be honest, I actually felt more for Benny than I did for Barb, because it's obvious she was going to die. And in my opinion, it was obvious that she was not safe, and it was obvious that she was dead within the Upside Down. And that scene when they find her, and she's all decaying and whatnot and just rotting away. Wow. What an impactful moment when Eleven finally finds her. And she's just a little girl. So, of course, it's going to terrify her all the more. The performance put in by this actress for Eleven was astounding. It's a fucking tour de force performance, man. She's just so believable, and you just imagine the things that you would be going through, isolated in the way she was by the government that keeps her and experiments with her, taken from her mother, because I think her real name's meant to be Jane, because it's just the one scene when they're Hopper and Joyce are exploring this, when they start to piece things together between medical experiments and children with psychic powers and whatnot. And this one woman has lost her child. It was taken from her, and it's pretty much suggested that's 11. But yeah, powerful scene. Poor Barb. A lot of people love Barb, but for me, Benny was a really cool character in the short time that he was on screen. And they're right. The way that they built him up, I thought he was going to be throughout the entire show. I thought he was going to be a major impact. And then, boom, killed. Just like that. No mercy by the government, which is great for 2 reasons from a writing standpoint. One, it fucks with you and forces you to go off balance so you know that no one is safe. Exactly what Matt Duffer is saying here. And 2, it establishes the government enemies as exactly that. Cruel, malicious, calculated, effective, efficient bad guys. They are willing to kill. They're not afraid to do it, and they will do it again. That is what's so scary about them. Another thing, and one of the major pros that I had with this story was the strong thematic ideas that it explored. Again, these are things that are explored in any 80s movie, really, of that time period for this audience in this style. Fears of the unknown, sexual awakenings for teenagers, things like that. Nancy loses her virginity to Steve, who at the point was simply manipulating her to get into her pants before he learns a lesson and tries to become a better person. Got the concept, of course, kids versus adults. You know, in an adult world where kids have no power and they try to be able to have a voice as they grow up, yet be stimulated. It's great. Kids versus adults is always a great one if done right. And so many 80s movies do this wonderful. It's this air of whimsy that they're able to capture. And it's something that the Duffer Brothers have just done phenomenally with Stranger Things. Government secrets, of course, is one of the strong thematic ideas of the government versus normal people, trusting in the government as opposed to questioning them, and the government as a whole being almost a faceless entity. I mean, we have faces to look at here, but we get so little time with them that we barely get to know them at all. Now, I had to do some long, hard thinking about some of the major things that I didn't like or some of the things I questioned about this story because I was so taken with so many elements of it. You know, all the elements added up to such a wonderful mosaic for this story, for Stranger Things, what they were trying to achieve. Each individual element just heightens the experience of the story and just impacts you and sucks you into it in a way that I didn't expect this show to do. But there are some things that I didn't enjoy, or some things, like I say, at most, I questioned. We were just talking about the government being almost faceless enemies. That is one of the major issues I had with this show. You know, the government enemies are at best brushstrokes. Dr. Brenner, you know, Eleven's, quote, papa, you know, and it's always heartbreaking when she's looking at him and she's being dragged away and he's so cold just watching it as it happens. And the rest of them, you know, they're near enough faceless, nameless antagonists. Their purpose is imbued with meaning. You know, Dr. Brenner, we know he's a scientist. We learn through the newspaper clippings and the research that Hopper does, who they are, where they come from, and what they're after. And, you know, what they're capable of. You know, just look at the Will's body that was fished out of the lake that was supposed to be his body that Hopper broke in and slashed open in order to find out stuffing was inside of this incredibly lifelike model because of the government. Man, they want to cover it up. They want you to not question things. They want you to never question things. But in doing so, I mean, there's power to the faceless enemy, but at the same time, for a story like this, where we're so connected on a personal level with so many of these characters, if I was jarringly aware, come the end of the season, that he's kind of just like a stock bad guy that she considers a father, and that's it. I would love to know more about him going forward, and he does seem to die at the end of the show with the Demogorgon jumping on top of him. Although we cut away suspiciously fast from that death. So, I mean, is he dead? I don't know. We have to wait to season 2, perhaps, if that happens. Which, honestly, given the critical reception to this show, definitely looks like it will. I've got a quote here from Matt Duffer on Dr. Brenner's character, actually, interestingly enough. And this is taken from EmpireOnline.com, Empire being the UK movie magazine that a lot of people love. Quote, "When we cut to him as little as we do and give him so little dialogue, how do you make him an interesting character? That's a character who we didn't really figure out until we started working with Matthew. And he brought a lot himself. He informed it. And I'm really happy with where we wound up with him at the end. With something that was discovered during the course of shooting, really." End quote. Honestly, I think there's a lot within that. If you really want to peel away what he's saying, they didn't really know his character. They didn't know where they were going to go with him. They didn't know what they were going to do with him. And just like we were talking about the boy who played Dustin earlier, the actor Matthew seems to have imbued his character with a lot of purpose and meaning to them. Worked phenomenally with Dustin. I do not think it worked with Dr. Brenner. But, like I say, there's a lot of stuff to cover over 8 episodes. So, you know, his backstory could have just fallen to the wayside. It could be there. There could be a history that we're just not aware of that could be picked apart and explored come season 2. But this is season 1. This is season 1, and he is the main antagonist for the enemies who are hunting down 11 in order to get her back. So I feel there really should have been a little bit more development there, honestly. The Upside Down. The Upside Down itself confused me slightly because within all of its decay, within its Silent Hill decay with everything floating in the air, and it's very visually picturesque, it looks wonderful in a horrifying, terrifying sort of way. If it's meant to be a reflection of our world, and of course the boys call it the Upside Down, it's a wonderfully simplistic way of looking at it because of their science teacher explaining it to them along the tightrope, and the cockroach is upside down, and so they just call it the Upside Down. If it's meant to be this reflection of our world, a dark reflection, where are all the people? Why is there no one else there inhabiting this? I mean, there are buildings. The buildings are there, but a decayed version of it because it's the dark side. But why are there no dark equivalents to everybody that's within this town? Unless the monster killed them all. I don't know. Will's parents are completely oblivious to what's happening in their own basement, and as a story point, I found this a bit too easy. For them to be so purposely obtuse just served a purpose, and I don't know, I really don't think real people would have been so oblivious to a living human being hiding in their house and them not knowing about it. I believe there was a scene where she's using the utilities, like the laundry, doing the laundry downstairs, washing or dryer or whatever, and there's the fort and that 11 hides in, but she never questions it. You know, she never looks at anything. I guess she just goes down and go, oh, it's something Will's doing, and then leaves it. But that in itself surely is kind of like hands-off parenting a little bit. I found that a little bit bothersome, but at the same time, I remember reading a news article a little while ago. Look it up if you want. There was somebody who was living in somebody else's house in Japan, and the person had no idea about it. They were living like in the up bit of their closet where you can put your linens, like your blankets and stuff. And this other person had no idea they were inhabiting this flat with them, which is a terrifying fucking thought that somebody could be hiding in your house and you have no fucking clue. Hey, I just looked over my shoulder just then, and I'm doing it right now. I'm pretty sure I'm alone, thankfully. But what a scary fucking thought. The egg that Hopper finds in the Upside Down, there's one egg. Now, the question, of course, becomes, is that where the monster came from? Is this simply just an alien's reference for the sake of it? And then, of course, if there are meant to be people in the dark Upside Down, and this monster came along in order to take over, where did that monster come from? How did it come to be a part of the Upside Down? If this is an alien egg, maybe, why did it go to the Upside Down, but not, quote, the real world? Because that's all perspective, of course. Is the Upside Down a product of the end of the world? Is it an alien invasion? I don't know. It's weird. A lot of questions asked, very lost, very J.J. Abrams, a lot of questions asked even by the season end, a lot answered, even more asked to keep you engaged. I do have this quote from Ross Duffer talking about the monster in the Upside Down, and this is taken from Variety.com. And this is a good one, actually. This gives a lot of context to their mindset, to how they wrote this story. Quote, "There's a lot there we don't know or understand. Even with the Upside Down, we have a 30-page document that is pretty intricate in terms of what it all means and where this monster actually came from and why aren't there more monsters. We have all this stuff that we just didn't have time for, or we didn't feel like we needed to get into it in Season 1 because of the main tension of Will. We have that whole other world that we haven't fully explored in this season, and that was very purposeful," end quote. This is something that time after time in the research I was doing and the quotes I was finding, they would say, it was on purpose. They did this on purpose. It wasn't time restriction. It wasn't this. It wasn't by accident. Like master manipulators, like puppet masters. Yet at the same time, on the other side of this exact same coin, they're constantly saying about how there's some elements they were making up as they were going along. The actors helped to imbue meaning and purpose and characteristics to the characters they were playing. Like it seems almost slapdash in the way they were handling it. Yet they pulled it off. You know, there was obviously a lot of discussion and production and planning that go into this. A 30-page document, the majority of which we're not even aware of or have seen. That's pretty cool. That means we're working with backstories that have been alluded to even on a subconscious, subliminal level within this show. You're going to have to do some real research in order to find that out. Here's a question. If Will is in the Upside Down, which I believe at one point they mention is toxic and he looks unwell, doesn't he? When they find him, he looks very, very sickly. Should he not be deathly sick with radiation poisoning of some sort? Because I believe they say it is radioactive, the government agents, when they went through and stuff like that. If that is the case, surely Will is a ticking time clock. He should die, really. That's harsh, of course. I'm glad Will's safe come the end of the show, quote-unquote safe. But surely there should be some grander repercussions if where he was toxic for a week with no protection whatsoever apart from hiding his little fort on the upside down version of it. I think there would be some sort of radiation poisoning, some sort of sickness should take him, really, or be present. Now, my next point is probably one of the biggest issues that I had with this story, and it wasn't any individual story point, it was to do with a character. And this could be Steve's controversial opinion, man. I started using this in the wrestling podcast that I've been helping out with recently, co-hosting with my friend Kieran, who I met through our mutual friends at Vault Comics in Welling. So if you're looking for a comic book fix, go hit up Vault Comics in Welling. Nancy is actually quite unlikable. She does let her family down frequently. She lies. It goes behind their back. She does break her promises to her supposed best friend, Barbara, which directly leads to Barbara's death. Do not be mistaken. There is no middle point or halfway. If they had left because Barbara, being the sober, responsible person that she was, if they had left at the time that she wanted to, if Nancy had been a good friend and listened and not broken her promise to her, which we learned during the course of the show, of course, being friends means that you don't lie to each other. Making promises matter. Kids, man. It's that concept again. If she hadn't broken that promise, Barbara would still be alive. The death of Barbara is directly on Nancy. The blood is on her hands, and she knows it. That's why she becomes so obsessed when Barbara goes missing. They start piecing this together through Jonathan's photography. A little bit weird when we did go all stalkery. Not really sure on that. Didn't really make too much sense, but okay, he did it, and he got the photo of the monster in there. Yeah. And she seems to get close with Jonathan. It's heavily hinted that the relationship, she's going to leave Steve because he's a fucking dickhead jerk and get with Jonathan, the social outcast loner who could potentially skin bunnies just for fun, before simply hooking up with a redeemed Steve. Comes back to save her. And it's interesting because there's elements of real life there, I suppose, in the sense of he's a good-looking prom king sort, I suppose, within this world. And, big hair and whatnot. That's how he's built, at least, or that's how he's portrayed. So the nerd and the cool kid do end up together, which is definitely putting tropes on its head, which is nice. But at the same time, it's still odd that she would seemingly get so close to Jonathan just to potentially let him down and break his heart after all of the stress and emotional duress that he's been under in order to find his brother and dealing with his mother Joyce as she loses her fucking mind. The entire town, I'm surprised, didn't ostracize her or were in the throes of ostracizing her because of her madness as it took her. But of course, she knew the truth. And the others did not. Even Jonathan didn't believe her at one point when they had their argument in the street and everybody started watching. Great scene. Nancy, I found to be the most unlikable character in the entire show because of these issues. Yeah, I had issues with her character, honestly. The story jumps, right? The story jumps at the end of the season 1 month into the future. And a lot of questions arise because of this, How are they all doing as characters, as people? How can the boys play more Dungeons & Dragons having seen real monsters? I would have thought that they would have really had negative associations with that game. Because the last time they played it, their friend went missing to the Demigorgon, and then, of course, they had to face a real monster themselves. I would have thought Dungeons & Dragons would have been one of the things they would never, ever, ever want to play again. And, of course, the question of why is Nancy with Steve? What happened in that month for him to further redeem himself? Did they work it out? How did they work it out? There's a lot of questions posed because a month can be a long time. Time slips very quickly. We all know that. But a month, a lot can happen in that on a personal relationship level. Now, this leads me to the biggest issue I have with this, slightly, honestly. And again, this is another potential controversial opinion here. I think if they really wanted to, they could have wrapped up the story within one season. And it could have been one season and just lived forever as 8 amazing episodes. But 2 added scenes right at the end of the last episode switch it to sequel bait. Will going into the bathroom and slipping into the upside down as he looks into the mirror, as well as Hopper leaving food, those Eggos, for 11 in that box, because of course when she takes care of the monster and finally kills him using her powers, or kills it using her powers, destroying it into oblivion as it rips apart and decays, she disappears herself, and we don't know if she's alive or dead. We don't know where she is. She could be in the upside down. Hopper leaving Eggos in that box certainly suggests so. But is he simply just trying to contact her, or in that month period, has he already contacted her? Does he know she's okay? Again, we go back to that mystery box. If those scenes weren't there, if they had decided to, they could have wrapped this up quite neatly. A lot of the questions could still be in there, a month later, how did Nancy end up with Steve and stuff like that, but you fill in the blanks yourself, you make up your own story, you figure it out. It still would have been a satisfying conclusion to the story that they're telling, the way that they wrote it. As it ends, though, sequel bait, absolute sequel bait. But the reason I feel that it wasn't necessary for this show is because I think they really did come to a conclusion that could have been wrapped up so nicely into one package. The only saving grace that I take from this is that in the interviews that I read, they were very specific about not wanting to make it last too long. They didn't want to drag out the story as far as it can go and then push it even further to a point where people have lost interest. And I think that's great. I think going forward, what they need to do is continue this 8-episode arc, maybe push it to 10 if they really, really wanted to, as long as it could keep the story honed and on point, and have an idea of where they want it to end. Go out there and in their manifesto, clearly state this is a 4-arc story. This is a 3-arc story, a 5-arc story, and then plan it and plot it around that and come to the end of it. That is it. Wrap it up. That is done. That story is over. There's no need to push it just because the studio wants it, for example, which other shows have been victim to, definitely fallen victim to. A lot of shows should have ended long time before they hit their apex, and it's all downhill from that point, and people, they still watch, they're still fans, but it's just not the same, and people know it. And I'll end my review on this quote from the Duffer Brothers on the Stranger Things finale, taken from EW.com, and I quote, "As far as the story is concerned, it was important to us that the finale resolve the main tension. Will goes missing in the beginning of our story, and he's found at the end. But we also wanted to leave some important questions unanswered. What happened to 11? Why the hell is Nancy with Steve instead of Jonathan? Does it have something to do with Steve's beautiful Christmas sweater? Why is Hopper leaving Eggos in the woods? Does he know where 11 is? What kind of effect did living the Upside Down have on Will? What exactly is the Upside Down? Was our monster the only monster that lives there? What the hell was in those yellow eggs? We know the answers to all these questions and more, we promise, but we wanted to keep the mystery alive, to leave the door cracked for potential sequels," end quote. And that's exactly what they did. If that was their intention as writers, you know what? I hold my hands up. More props to you. That was a decision. That was a writing choice. I just feel that if you'd wanted to, you could have pushed the narrative to a point where you could have very nicely wrapped it up with one season, and it would have lived forever as an amazing one season that everybody talked about. Instead, it's a season 1 that could lead to an amazing season 2. Now, my final thoughts on this as I wrap up this review of Stranger Things, available on Netflix right now. Honestly, Stranger Things is an enthralling blend of references and homage that creates an intoxicating show that is well-paced throughout its 8 episodes. By taking all these separate influences and wearing them so proudly, perhaps even brazenly, the Duffer Brothers have in turn created something fresh, something new. And although not really truly original, often feeling like many other stories that I've seen before, it's undeniable that Stranger Things has been able to create something refreshing out of these old stories. This is not a retread. It's not a consistent nudge, nudge, wink, wink. What they have created is a new IP born out of the love they have for numerous older concepts. Honestly, I love this. It's the exact sort of thing I would love to be able to write. They wear their influences on their sleeve in a way that I do, which makes what they want to achieve immediately resonate with my inner geek, which, in fairness, is also my outer geek, because I am a full-fledged geek. Stranger Things has immediately rocketed itself into my top shows, man. One that I, like most, will advocate to their friends and family who have yet to watch it. The time period, the acting, the set designs, the concepts, and captivating images. Just think of Winona Ryder with the Christmas lights trying to connect with Will on the upside down. Man, like what a striking visual image that is. All of these things help to elevate a story that could have so easily been mired in an exhausted sort of like, man, I've seen this before response. But instead, it provides a captivating mystery that grabs hold of you and never lets you go. Instead, layering on layer after layer of intrigue and interest, all wrapped up in a wonderful dark Amblin-style package. In short, you gotta do yourself a favor and watch this show. Yeah, if you are listening to this review in order to determine if this is worth your time, 100% absolutely it is. If you were wondering about my opinion about this show after having watched it yourself, so this is spoiler free for you, well, I think you know it. I want to end with this quote that I was able to pull from Ross Duffer on their inspiration for Stranger Things and on Netflix taking a chance, because I think not enough people do nowadays for new ideas, for new things like that, because all anybody ever needs is a chance. Sometimes all anybody needs is the right set of eyes on their work at the right time, and that's it. Quote, I think audiences are getting excited. They want to see original stuff out there. I think people are embracing this because it's really us just going, hey, these were the movies we loved. These were the types of stories we loved. And in all honesty, we couldn't get this made as a movie in a million years. I could have pitched that until the end of time and no one would have made it. Then we were seeing True Detective, and you're seeing this stuff, and these filmmakers are going into TV, and that's a world that's willing to take chances. We still didn't think somewhere like Netflix would take a chance on us, but luckily the David Finchers of the world and Genji Kohans and whoever paved this path when Netflix felt comfortable giving some newer voices a shot, which is really what they gave us. They just took a leap of faith on us. End quote. That's all sometimes anybody ever needs. You look at the success of Stranger Things and what it's been able to accomplish, and that's because somebody looked at their wonderfully crazy idea and decided to give it a chance. But is the story officially too sweet or officially just not sweet enough? Netflix Original Series Stranger Things is officially too sweet, in case you couldn't have guessed. So that's it, man. Thank you so much for checking out this episode. The very first TV show that I've been able to review for Sweet Story Bro, Stranger Things on Netflix. And you know what? If you agreed with some of my points, let me know. And importantly as well, actually, if you disagree with some of my points, if you think I'm wrong, let me know as well. Tweet in at sweetstorybro. You can email me at sweetstorybro@icloud.com as well if you so chose. But let me know. I'd be really curious to know what you think about this show, your feelings on it, your favorite things about it as well. But of course, thank you so much for listening, and be sure to let me know what you think about this show and my show on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, email, wherever you want. Everything that you need as well, of course, is on sweetstorybro.com. So if all those links, all those different things are too confusing, sweetstorybro.com has got you sorted. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube, actually, so you don't miss out on any future sweet updates regarding the state of the show, which is where I've been announced that I was taking that little break away in order to do this reformat in the first place, to things like the Uncharted retrospective playthroughs. We'll let you know when they're happening, and we'll archive them on the YouTube as well if you can't watch them live as I play them and can answer any and all of your questions. And if you like this episode, if you dug what I had to say and the work that was put into this show, why not leave a tip, man? A couple of bucks maybe, less than a cup of coffee or a cupcake or muffin, and it helps the show to no end. And you know what? It is super easy for you to do. If people do this to Twitch, if people do this for Twitchers as they play games, why not podcasters, man? We put in just as much work in order to entertain you. the fans, my friends. And you can do this at paypal.me/sweetstorybro, paypal.me/sweetstorybro. So be sure to share the show with your story-loving friends too. Share the love, spread the conversation. If somebody's on the fence about watching Stranger Things, show them this episode. That'll definitely convince them. Or, alternatively, if you've already watched the show, send it to your friend anyway. See what they think, if their opinions coalesce with mine. So until next time, my friend, be sure to keep your eyes on Twitter, as always, for the Monday mention. Every Monday that a show is not out, I will tell you what the story will be for that next show. So you can read it, watch it, play it, whatever it needs to be in order to not be spoiled, because we go in depth with these stories here, man. So sign up at Sweet Story Bro on Twitter if you haven't yet. Keep your eye for the Monday mention, and by all means, I implore you, as always, to go enjoy some stories. So until next time, Story Bros, I'm out. If you enjoyed today's episode where I reviewed Stranger Things by the Duffer Brothers, available on Netflix right now for you to stream, why not do yourself a favor and go check out the OG, man, the guy who helped inspire these guys when they were kids to deliver the product that they gave us now, Stephen King. Go explore some of his novels, and with my help, you can do that. If you visit audibletrial.com/sweetstorybro today, you get a 30-day free trial in order to see if you like the service that Audible can provide, and a free audiobook of your choice. That's right, free. You don't pay nada. Cujo, The Shining, It, so many to choose from. audibletrial.com/sweetstorybro. Go check it out, man.